The old Nintendo Ninja Gaiden games don't really mess around. Requiring pinpoint platforming and deft combat, this trilogy of Tecmo-made games were brutal. Of course, none of that was aided by the late game segment where if you died during a trio of bosses, you had to start up multiple levels back, and who could forget those freaking birds? But aside from the revived 3D series kicked off by Tomonobu Itagaki on Xbox, Ninja Gaiden just faded away after the 3 NES games. While some games carried forth its tough 2D influence, not many carried its legacy, with all due respect to the concurrent Shinobi games and the Game Boy Advance cult classic Ninja 5-0. The majesty of the old-school Ninja Gaiden games primarily lay dormant, at least until now. Canadian developer Sabotage Studio is bringing The Messenger to Nintendo Switch. A quick glance makes the game look like a long-lost cousin of Tecmo's currently forgotten series. Even the stories of the two games have similarities, both being about ninjas, demons, and ninjas fighting said demons. Sabotage's co-founder Thierry Boulanger explained to us some of the influences. As a kid, I used to look for games where your character did a front flip when jumping, Boulanger told us. It just felt so cool for some reason, so I guess the ninja was the ultimate hero. That idea of the ninja being the ultimate hero seemed to have influenced Tecmo back in the 1980s. According to Ninja Gaiden developer Masato Kato, the very genesis of the series came from the simple fact that ninjas were cool back then. I guess everyone loves a front-flippin' hero. That wasn't the only inflection point, according to Boulanger. He also cited the overall gameplay, music, and the dark story. Ninja Gaiden was an important series to the inspiration of The Messenger, and overall, in the grand scheme of console video games. You see, back in the late 80s, Ninja Gaiden started off as a project at Tecmo with an arcade version and an NES version in development at the same time. The gameplay of the two started to diverge, with the arcade game being a beat-em-up and the NES one being a platformer with a deep involved story. In between every level of Ninja Gaiden, Tecmo Theater would happen, a cinematic cutscene with close-ups, dialogue, and double crosses. It was groundbreaking, and while the dialogue might be laughable now, there wasn't anything like it back then. The key creators behind Ninja Gaiden were Hideo Yoshizawa and Masato Kato. Yoshizawa wrote and directed the first NES game, while Kato was the main artist. Later on, Yoshizawa still worked on the story, but then Kato took over as director for the last two games. These games were the two's first major foray into game development. Kato would leave Tecmo, eventually making his way to Square, penning the script for Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VII, and Xenogears, a relative who's who of important 90s RPGs. He also wrote and directed Chrono Cross, a personal favorite of my own. But then he left Square in the early 2000s to work as a freelancer, bouncing around the industry working on everything from the Monolith-developed Baten Kaitos to, well, the story for 2012's Ninja Gaiden 3. He came home eventually. Yoshizawa's path might not be as legendary as Kato's, but it's similarly impressive. Joining Namco after his time at Tecmo, he was the lead behind Klonoa and worked at Namco for many years producing Mr. Driller games and, the WiiWare game Muscle March. Boulanger and Sabotage aren't in the same position as Yoshizawa and Kato though. The studio's experience going into their love letter to Ninja Gaiden and similarly styled games. This might be Sabotage's first game, but the team isn't a bunch of rookies. And they learned from their predecessors. Boulanger told me he still plays Ninja Gaiden 2, his favorite of the series, weekly to this very day. One of the many things that helps the Messenger blaze its own trail forward is the cloud stepping mechanic. As Boulanger explains, it's where hitting something while airborne gives you an extra jump, repeatable as long as you can find targets. That led the team to ensure the level design was crafted in a way that made this elegant dance-like concept, as Boulanger put it, optional but very rewarding. Iteration helped refine the idea, and cloud stepping was implemented in fun even before the graphics were fully formed. Early prototypes fine-tuned the controls with just stick figures and gray boxes. The swerve the Messenger throws at you is that, at a certain point in the story, the game can go from 8-bit to 16-bit, opening up a completely different playstyle. Up until then, it's a straightforward progression, while the 16-bit areas add in elements of Metroid and Castlevania. It's almost akin to the Super Nintendo port of the Ninja Gaiden trilogy, but that version was just a mere port, a graphical overlay, whereas the Messenger's twist revolves around the story where time traveling sends the 8-bit world into the 16-bit future. In a sense, we were robbed of seeing how the Ninja Gaiden games would evolve. Aside from a Game Boy prequel and the Super Nintendo port, the series faded away for a decade after the NES games, potentially from the fact that the main developers left Tecmo, and a focus on 3D games on PlayStation and Sega Saturn might have colored Tecmo's goals in the mid-90s. But what if? What would have happened if Ninja Gaiden stuck around in its 2D form? Boulanger offered a predictable but potentially true answer. The Messenger is where that 2D series would have gone. He specifically pointed out the additions of light RPG elements, Metroid-esque design, and a gliding wingsuit as embellishments to the established Ninja Gaiden formula. The Messenger is set to release very soon on Nintendo Switch and PC as well, so we'll find out if it truly does live up to its inspiration in due time. It's encouraging to see dormant concepts and ideas return, featuring new twists baked in from fresh minds. The Ninja Gaiden NES games are, even if you hate the difficulty, important, well-made adventures, and it's about time someone more deliberately brought their style forward. I'm Neal Ronahan with Nintendo Report TV, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to see more stuff like this, let us know, like, share, subscribe, comment, say all sorts of nice things, and we'll keep doing stuff like this.